In this video, we will discuss how to deal with strings in Python. We will learn different ways to define a string, basic operations on strings, important string methods to use when parsing a text file, and then we're gonna exercise. We're gonna parse a text file using string methods. Let's get started. In Python, everything that comes enclosed by quotes will be considered a string. In this example, we define this string "heyu" in three different ways, using single quote, double quote, and triple quote. If we now ask Python if text1 is equal to text2 and text2 is equal to text3, let's see what we get. I save it and run it. We get true. They are in fact the same string. But why do we have different ways to define the same string? That difference is only important when you want to add quote to your string. Let me show you. If I just comment that code and bring another one, that code now is quite simple. We define a variable called message and we assign to that a string which says that's good. If I just clean my terminal and run it, we get that's good. But note that we don't have our quote here. Let's add a single quote. I just add it, try to run that code, and look, we now get a syntax error. Why? Because when the Python interpreter goes to the line 11 and it finds the first single quote, it knows that a new string is gonna be defined. And then, as soon as it finds the next quote, that string is defined, and everything which is enclosed by those single quotes, it's gonna be a string. And the rest, from the letter S to that single quote, it's something that Python does not recognize. And therefore, it raised that syntax error. How to get rid of that, or how to fix that? One way is to use the backslash. And the backslash basically says, skip the next character. If I just clean that terminal and run it, we get now that's good, but using that single quote here. Another way to fix it, let's just get rid of my single quotes. If you want to add single quotes to your string, you just need to enclose it with double quotes. Let me run it, and that's it. You get that's good, and you get your single quote here. Likewise, if you want to add a double quote, you just need to enclose it with single quotes. If I run it, we get again that's good, but now using double quotes. But what about the triple quote? Let me just delete all the quotes and enclose it using triple quotes. 1, 2, 3. And the triple quote is the most flexible way to define a string. Why? Because you don't need to care if you need to use single quote or double quote. You can use both. I would say that's good. You can even go to the next line. And in that line, I'll just write superb and actually put it enclosed by a double quote. If I now run that code, we get that's good, superb. And that's how you can define your string. If you don't need to add quotes to your string, doesn't matter if you use single quote or double quote. Now, let's have a look at useful operations we can perform on strings. The basic operations on strings are similar to what we did with list data type. That's because they are both sequences. Our first operation is how to calculate the length of any string. We do that by that function called len. We just type len, and as argument, you provide a string. If I run that code, we're gonna get 6. There are 6 characters here. Now, if I just provide a space and run that code again, we get 7. Be aware that space also counts. Our second operation is how to access a single character of a string. We do that by that idea of indexing. And indexing in Python starts with 0. Let me show you. You just type the name of your string, then you open and close the square brackets, and now you just provide the index. As I said, index starts with 0. 0 will refer to the first letter. If I just run that code, let me just clean that first. We get F, because F is the first letter. Then A is gonna be 1, and so on. What about I? We just count 0, 1, 2, 3, empty space, 4, it also counts, then 5. I is gonna be 5. Perfect. What about the last letter? We can either just count from the left to the right or from the right to left. How to do that? We just use the argument -1, and -1 will refer to the last letter. If I run it, we get n. If -1 is the last letter, the one before the last is -2, and so on. You got the idea. We access a single character of a string using that idea of indexing. Our next operation is how to slice a string. Let me just comment the index example and uncomment the slicing one. It's a bit similar to what we did in the last example. We just type the name of the string, in that case channel name, then we open and close the square brackets, and now we give the start index, colon, and the end index. What you need to know, the start index is always included and the end index is excluded. Let me show you. If I want to get the word fall, F is assigned to 0, right? What about the last L? 0, 1, 2, 3. Then, if I run that code, we're gonna get fall. There is only one L. Why? Because I just said the end index is always excluded. If I want to include that letter, we should add one unit here. Then we're gonna get fall. Perfect. Now, let's try to get the word in. We saw before that I is 5, then the next one is 6. But if I just let 6, I will just print I. Then we type 7. And there you go, we got in. And as a small tip for you, if I want to get, for instance, the word Python, let's just keep counting. That's 5, 6, 7, 8, right? So that's the index 8. As I want to have the complete word here, I can just let the end index empty. If I run it, we get Python. And that's it. That's how you can slice strings. Our next operation is string concatenation. We often do string concatenation for printing and writing to a file. Let's check that example. I'll just uncomment it. We have Rodrigo as a string and we assign that to name. And surname is assigned to Correa. If I now want to concatenate name and surname, we just use the plus sign. If I run that code, we get string. Why string? Because we are also printing the type of that variable and then the value of that variable. Therefore, we get string and Rodrigo Correa. Notice that there is no space here. How to solve that? You can either give a space in the name, that would work, or here in the surname in the beginning, that would also work, or you don't need to give any space neither on name nor in surname, but here you just add a named string. Then you would get Rodrigo Correa. Another operation which is very often used when writing to a file is string repetition. Let me show you that. I just comment that example and bring the repetition. I will just clean the terminal. How does that work? Here I have a string called loop and assigned to a variable called text. Now if I print 3 times text, what are you expecting to get? Let me show you. We get loop, loop, loop. And that also works if we have number. When I say number, 1 here it's integer, but as it is enclosed by quote, it's no longer an integer, but a string. If I now run that code, we get 1, 1, 1. And that technique is very much used when you want to style our file, when you want to write and give some headers and things like that. And that's string repetition. The last basic operation on string you need to know is the fact that we can iterate over a string. Let me show you. Comment that and uncomment that example. Again, we assign fall in Python to a variable called channel name. Now we can iterate over that string doing for letter in channel name, print letter. Let's see what we get. We get F, A, L all the way up to N. Perfect. There is also a very nice function that you can use in case you want to track the index of that letter. We just type enumerate, and then that enumerate is a function, it's a built-in function in Python, and that expects one argument, in that case a sequence. It means that we can also use enumerate with list. In that case our sequence is a string, and now we give index and letter. So we say for index and letter in enumerate, print not only letter but index as well. If I clean the terminal, run it, note that, as I said, index starts with 0, and that's why we get 0f, 1a, and so on. The last letter is 13, but remember that we can refer to the last letter using the -1 index. To access methods and attributes of any data type, we use the function dir. We type dir, and the argument is the element you want to inspect. I want to inspect text. If I just print that to the terminal, we get a list, and that list has a bunch of elements, and each element is a string. How do I know that? Because it comes enclosed by quote. We are not interested in methods which starts with underline. Why? Because there are special methods in Python. Let's use some of the concepts we learned so far and remove all the elements which contain underline on it. How to do that? We know that the dir returns a list, therefore we can iterate over it. Then we can say for method in dir text print method. We now comment that line and run that code. Now each element is in each line. Alright, but all the methods containing the underline are still there. To solve that, we just need a conditional statement. We say if method. Now I want to check if the first character of that string is underline. I say if method 0 is equal to underline, then continue. And what that does, it forces the loop to start the new iteration. If I just save that code and run it, check that we no longer have the underline methods. Note that a string data type has a bunch of methods. You don't need to memorize all of them. Let's use one of the methods to reproduce what we just did. Here, we just check it if the first character was underline, and if that returns true, we would force the next iteration to start. We can do the same thing using the start with method. We say if method, that's the string, then I can call its method, how, using the dot notation. Now I type the name of the method. In that case, it starts with. And now we say if method starts with underline, if that's true, continue. Now if I run that code, we get the same result. To get to know what each method does, we just need to use the help function. Let me show you. You type help. What is the object or the variable we want to inspect? Is text. If I just use the dot or the dot notation, we are now accessing its method. Let's take starts with. Let's just print that to the screen and comment that code because I don't want to print again all the methods. And then get starts with, it's a string method which returns true if that string starts with the specified prefix. Which prefix? The argument you give to that method. And that's how you can use the help function to get more information about each of the methods. I will not explain you all of the methods here. We are going to focus on methods which help us on parsing TXT files. Let's go to the exercise. Let's say that we have that fictitious lottery where 6 balls are drawn weekly. Our task is to read that file or parse that file and populate them to a list data type. Let's do that. If you're following that series, you remember that we can open a file using the open function. And that function expects 2 arguments, the name of the file and the mode. What is the name of the file? Is exercise.txt. And we want to read that file, therefore we use R. R is short for read. You also learned that we can open that file using the with statement, and the with statement guarantees that that file is going to be closed. Then we say with open, that's going to create a file object, and then we assign to a variable. I'm going to call it file. We can call it whatever you want. Then I say for line in file, print line. If you run that code, Python exercise.py, note that we have an empty line between each string. Why? Because each line ends with that \n. Therefore, if we want to get rid of that empty line, we need to strip that \n. How to do that? We just reassign line to line.strip, and what we want to strip, the \n. Now, if we clean the screen and run that code, we get all the lines or all the strings and no longer an empty line between them. Note that we are just interested in the strings which starts with the word numbers. How to do that? We can check, we say if line, then we use our second method. We say starts with, what we want to check, the word numbers. If that string starts with the word numbers, we can print that line. If I clean that terminal and run that code, we just get the strings which starts with numbers. Now we need to strip that substring called numbers. Let's do that. We then reassign line to line.strip. What we want to strip? Numbers. And the column. If I now run that code, we see that we just get the numbers. However, there is something we still need to deal with. Between the numbers, there is that comma. Then let's replace that comma by an empty space. We do that by again reassign line by line dot. That's going to be our third method that's called replace. And the replace method asks for two arguments. The first one is what we want to replace. We want to replace the comma. And then we want to replace the comma by empty string. If I save and run that code, we now get all the numbers without the comma. There is just one step missing. We are going to split that string and convert that to a list. We do that by the split method. We then reassign line to line.split. And now, if I save that code and run it, you see that each line is converted to a list. And remember that when you read data from a text file, that data is a string. Again, how to know that? Because that's enclosed by quote. Alright, now we just need to create a list. I'll call it numbers list. That's going to be an empty list. Now we just need to append. We say numbers list dot append what? That line. Now outside that block or outside of the with statement, why? Because we no longer need to deal with that file, we can print the numbers list. Then I'll comment line 15 because I don't want to print that again. Clean that screen and run it. Note that when printing a list, each element is displayed side by side. If we want to display that line by line, we can use a function called pprint. For that, we need to import it. We just say from pprint, import pprint. Then we're going to be able to access that function. I'll just now add one p here, clean that screen and run it. And there you go. On each element here is all the numbers that have been drawn weekly. And that's how you can use the string methods to parse files. I hope that video helps you to become more confident working with strings. In the next video, we'll start talking about a very important data type in Python called dictionary. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.